from genomic surveillance, we're shifting our conversation to a similarly important and quite a hot topic of discussion: building the African continent's vaccine manufacturing capacity. The African continent imports 99% of the vaccines used by its population, and the COVID-19 pandemic has shown how unsustainable that is and how it needs to change. I'm joined today by a distinguished list of speakers who are among those working on the front lines of this effort. We have with us Petro Terblanche, Managing Director of Afrigen Biologics; Simon Agwale, Founder and CEO of Innovative Biotech and Director of the African Vaccine Manufacturing Initiative; Charles Gore, Executive Director of the Medicines Patent Pool; and Frederik Kristensen, Deputy CEO of CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. Before we start, I just want to let you all know that we do have a live illustration for this panel, and we'll be showing you the final visual at the end of today's discussion. Petro, you are recently in the news, and for great reason. Last month, Afrigen Biologics hit a milestone by being able to successfully replicate Moderna's mRNA-based COVID-19 vaccine using publicly available information. And that's just within a few months from when the mRNA vaccine technology transfer hub was set up last year. Can you talk about how much partnerships played a role in reaching this milestone and what challenges lie ahead to getting this vaccine approved and used across the continent and beyond?
Jenny, thank you. Partnerships were absolutely essential. And these are partnerships which is not only in technological or research space, but partnerships to enable funding, partnerships that will enable the creation of a world-class facility, and partnerships to guide us through a complex process of making a vaccine in a setting where an mRNA vaccine was never produced. So the first partnership that I'd like to mention is in the research space. The partnership with University of the Witwatersrand and the Afrigen team, combining knowledge base that exists with knowledge that we found in the public domain, reading, listening, attending webinars. If you combine that public knowledge with knowledge of science and vaccines, although not mRNA, that combination made it possible for a team to forward innovate, starting with the sequence and forward innovate and make the drug product and the drug substance at lab scale. The other partnerships, Charles is on this call, Charles Gore from the Medicines Patent Pool. Absolute amazing partnerships, bringing in Team Europe, South African government, Medicines Patent Pool, WHO, to support us to not only build the right facility, but also to ensure that we meet the milestones of taking a first vaccine to the market from an Africa-based settings. The other very important partnership that I do want to mention is also researchers all over the world. We are working with technical support from all over the globe, giving input and guiding us in reaching this very important goal to build capacity and capabilities for low and middle income countries to be able to produce our own vaccines. And mRNA is a platform that WHO very strategically chose to put within this hub. Where are we going? What are the next steps? We're at laboratory scale now. And with again, the partnership of PATH, the PATH group working with us and technical support from over the world to scale, to produce scalable material, to ensure that by June this year, we have a facility that is regulatory fit for purpose and licensed to be able to produce vaccines for humans. And by November, to be ready to take a vaccine that is scaled and produced under good manufacturing practices into clinical trials. So the steps for us is to complete the process of designing, developing and producing a vaccine from a sequence right through to a final product that's fit for human use is a phenomenal task and a phenomenal opportunity that's given to people, scientists on the African continent. And that would have been impossible without partnership. Thank you.
Any challenges that you anticipate that lies ahead as you get this vaccine approved, and used by Africans and outside Africa?
So the immediate challenges are there is still some technological challenges for the team, but again, through partnerships, we will overcome that. I think the challenges in the broader ecosystem is to ensure that the vaccines are taken up into the market, that the spokes of that is part of this network of production and innovation is able to absorb the technology to produce GMP commercial batches, and that these products then has a full uptake into the communities and the populations where it is most needed and aimed to go. And that requires an ecosystem that can, with cold chain, necessary cold chain requirements, but an ecosystem that can take these vaccines the last mile. We've spent so much time on the technological innovations and the production of vaccines. But what really matters is that last mile to get this into people. And again, that will require significant collaboration. It might require some policy changes, and it will certainly require a fantastic team effort on the African continent to take at least the first vaccines produced here to the people of Africa.
Well, the hub was able to replicate Moderna's mRNA vaccine, but without Moderna's participation. I want to turn to Charles and just ask what sort of challenges does it present that the originator company is not involved? And do you have concerns about obtaining a voluntary license from the company down the road?
Thank you for the question, Jenny. I think that it obviously makes it a little more difficult not to have input from the originator company. But although this is more a question for Petro, but I think inevitably there'll be a bit of trial and error that could be smoothed out with input from a Moderna in this case. But turning to the intellectual property question, I think we need to be clear that Afrigen are doing two things. And again, I feel embarrassed talking about this when Petro is actually here. But Afrigen are doing two things. They're doing a proof of concept, which is replicating the Moderna vaccine to show that this is possible. And the idea is that if you do that, you know that the Moderna vaccine works. So if there's a problem with it, it's something that the Afrigen team are doing not right. If we went straight, or if Afrigen went straight to a brand new vaccine, then it would be difficult to tell whether there's something about the brand new vaccine that doesn't work, or whether it's the Afrigen team who not got something quite right. So simultaneously with doing this as a proof of concept, and of course under South African law, intellectual property law, it's fine. You do not in any way breach patents by using a patented invention for research purposes. So there's no issue there. So at the same time, Afrigen is working on a second generation vaccine that is what ultimately will go to market, using technologies that hopefully will be more suitable for vaccines for low and middle income countries. For example, using less or different raw materials because there is the potential for raw material shortage. Being able to produce at lower cost, very important. If you look at the prices of these vaccines in the $10 to $20 range, if you look at some other vaccines that are routinely used, like that for hepatitis B, it's sort of 20 cents or less. So it's a big gap in the sort of differential pricing of different vaccines. Of course, the Hep B vaccine is not an mRNA vaccine. Nonetheless, to make this really affordable, we need to get the price down. And then finally, thermostability. Requiring ultra cold chain that these vaccines do at the moment is far from ideal from an African context. So this new vaccine, second generation, the idea will be that it will have freedom to operate. It won't be bound by any patents. And so the issue should not arise.
So just to clarify, because there's been a report that says the hub is in talks with Moderna to obtain such a license. Even if that doesn't push through, it shouldn't be a big issue.
That's right. We have discussed with Moderna, and we will undoubtedly continue to discuss. But in some respects, this is a better way to go. It's a longer way to go, but in my view, it's a better way to go. If Moderna had come to us right at the beginning and said, here is our vaccine, here's how to make it, Afrigen would know how to make Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. Fantastic. However, not necessarily hugely helpful for the future in how to use the mRNA platform, for example, to make an HIV vaccine or to make a TB vaccine. Something that will ensure that this is a sustainable program. And furthermore, also to be ready for the next pandemic. So we're perhaps losing a bit of time up front, but potentially gaining a lot of experience that will be really useful further downstream. And Petro, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but that's certainly my feeling about it.
Well, partnerships, Professor Petro, would you like to add something?
Yes, if I may, in the early days, 8 months ago, we were geared to get a turnkey technology transfer. Today, we are grateful in many ways that we didn't get it, because this allowed the scientists to create, to innovate, and to create the basic building blocks for us to be able to also develop other vaccines. A turnkey tech transfer is a box. We're now not in a box. So it is certainly a blessing in disguise that we didn't get the tech transfer.
Well, partnerships have been key to setting up the hub. But similar partnerships are happening, between companies, between organizations in the African continent. And innovative Biotech is building the first vaccine manufacturing facility in Nigeria to hopefully produce a COVID-19 vaccine and later on move to producing vaccines for other diseases. Simon, can you talk about the technology you're using to develop a COVID vaccine and what role will partnerships play to accelerate the establishment of this facility?
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about the work that we have been doing over the years to set up vaccine manufacturing capability in Nigeria. Our platform is the virus-like particle, the VLPs, which are molecules that resemble the viruses, but are non-infectious because they contain no viral genetic material. And they spontaneously assemble from viral structure proteins, and they can be produced in multiple cell culture systems, including bacteria, mammalian cell lines, insects, yeast, and so on. So there are so many advantages using the VLP technology platform, and that was why we chose that to be our platform for advancing COVID-19. But before COVID-19, we used this platform to make other vaccines, HIV, and Ebola. But when COVID came, we decided to use the same platform to make COVID vaccine and develop the process so that we can use that process to design and build the vaccine manufacturing capability. Now, the advantages of VLP is that, as we all know, they present to the immune system a multi-antigenic particle that are analogous in size and morphology to the native variant. As you know, most of the vaccines that are currently in use today use the spike protein of the virus from the U1 strain. But the VLP allows you to incorporate, express other proteins of interest, like the matrix, the nucleoprotein, and then the envelope. So we are not only expressing the spike, we're also expressing the other proteins of interest, which have been shown to be pretty more conserved across the coronaviruses than using the spike protein alone. Now, when it comes to safety, I mean, we know certainly because they do not contain the genetic material, they are safe. And again, unlike the inactivated viruses that are currently in use today, like the Chinese, some Indian vaccines, VLPs do not require chemical inactivation. So you have the opportunity to better preserve the native antigenic structures.
But at what stage are you in the clinical trials at the moment?
Yes, I mean, where we are today, is we've done preclinical testing. We use the beta, the delta variant, and that's another advantage of the VLP, that you can create a multivalent composition. So we have the beta, the delta, and then we are now incorporating the Omicron, so we can make it a trivalent vaccine. So we were in South Africa. The phase 1, phase 2 trials will be conducted in South Africa. But we have defined the process, which we're partnering with Merck KGEA and with their subsidiary here in the US, Millipore Sigma, defined the process for the VLP manufacturing, and that process has been sent to Merck, and Merck has designed the facility. So we're in the process of raising the funds now to build a modular facility out of Europe that we can send to Nigeria and do end-to-end. That is developing the drug substance and then doing the fill finish operations. Again, finally, I would like to state that, as you know, most of the initiatives today in Africa and center on fill finish operations. So for sustainability, we must start focusing on upstream drug substance. If not, at the end of the day, we'll have empty fill finish facilities throughout the continent without the drug substance to fill. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I've heard from our panelists that the term sustainability, and I want to go to Frederik. Because one of CEPI's goals is really to build vaccine manufacturing capacity in low and middle income countries. What is CEPI doing to move into that direction in the African continent? And what is the thinking within CEPI about ensuring the long-term financial sustainability of these new facilities?
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. And so the framing here is that, CEPI, since its inception 5 years ago, following the Ebola outbreak, have had a particular focus on, the epidemic challenges facing Africa, and been working with African partners to develop vaccines for the diseases that are challenging. And so now, as part of the second 5-year strategy that we've launched, we, having learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, that the way the vaccine ecosystem is structured is clearly very challenging, and there's this, obvious need for greater local manufacturing capacity. We have ramped up our focus on manufacturing and supporting manufacturing capacities as well, because we need this type of globally distributed system, not only to increase access to doses in key regions, but also speed up response, putting manufacturing closer to the source of outbreaks. So practically, we've done 3 main things. I mean, one is to go into partnerships with key African global health initiatives. And we have an MOU with the African Union through the Africa Center for Disease Control, supporting the PAVM initiative, and working on capacity building, training local experts, etc. We also just recently partnered with the Institut Pasteur in Senegal to advance a regional manufacturing hub, building on a project that we had already been supporting for a while, called the MedInstill project. So this we'll support IPD both with expertise and technical support, but also use this novel technology of using plastic pouches or vaccine bags to really accelerate and scale up vaccine both capabilities and delivery. And the third partnership is with the IFC, where we are supporting them as a technical advisor. The second area is really we did a manufacturing survey globally, also one in Africa, and we're working with African partners like the PAVM to highlight where and support the thinking of how to develop production capabilities and capacities. And then the third area is to support innovations. We talked about the next generation of COVID-19 vaccines coming along. We are launched a call for more thermostable vaccines, as we just discussed. So we will be supporting projects in that area. And for all of this, we're building up our own vaccine manufacturing supply team internally. And interesting, we just launched a call to also identify more vaccine developers and manufacturing facilities on the continent to be able to support developing a manufacturing network.
And just a quick one, do you also see these facilities being able to manufacture some of the priority diseases of CEPI, Lassa fever, Nipah?
No, indeed. I think to your point on sustainability, clearly these facilities, and I think Simon addressed that as well, need to have important work to do in the non-pandemic or inter-epidemic periods and being kept warm, if I can call it that. So producing, either vaccines for, like as you say, Lassa fever, or even other diseases like yellow fever, and being ready to pivot when needed is an important part of this. Because and the other part of sustainability that I think we potentially could support is just doing really innovative work, finding new ways of having smaller footprint, cheaper, more efficient production facilities, hopefully really leapfrog development. And that is very much what CEPI can support going forward, and would be part of what these facilities would need.
Thank you so much, Frederik. I know that there's a lot of interest on this topic and lots of questions too, but let me open up this discussion more by inviting Jamie Nishi, Executive Director of the Global Health Technologies Coalition, to ask a question.
Great. Thanks, Jenny. And thank you, colleagues, for everything you're doing to advance the manufacturing ecosystem for vaccines. I actually have two different questions. Maybe just by background, the Global Health Technologies Coalition is a group of over 40 nonprofit organizations, academic institutions, and aligned businesses advancing research and development of drugs, vaccines, and diagnostics to bring healthier lives to all people. And often we're focused on poverty-related neglected diseases where commercial markets fail. In COVID, with the pandemic, obviously there's a huge commercial market, but we think a lot about how do we get products to that last mile, as Petro was talking about earlier. How do we make sure that these products are optimized? And so I have a question about manufacturing, and I have a question about research. Maybe for Dr. Simon and Dr. Petro, as you look at the investments in manufacturing and making sure that we're not building an Olympic stadium that gets used once, you've talked a little bit about how these increased and new capacities may be leveraged beyond COVID, which is really exciting to hear, hopefully for HIV, TB, malaria, and antimicrobial resistance research. But then how are we also making sure we're optimizing manufacturing in the broader R&D ecosystem? Would love to hear from you sort of what other investments are being made alongside the manufacturing capacity to make end-to-end product development a success. Can you speak about the environment for clinical trials, the environment for regulatory, especially as we're watching the ratification of the African Medicines Agency? So that's my manufacturing question. And then for Frederik and Charles on the research and development to get to that manufacturing, you've both talked a little bit about thermostability as a characteristic of vaccines that we need now and in the future. I'm just curious how your organizations are thinking about advancing global conversations on target product profiles or target product characteristics to think about how do we not just have a safe and effective vaccine, but how do we think about vaccines in the future that really are optimized, including for low resource settings and to reach that last mile?
Thank you so much, Jamie. Maybe Petro, would you like to start?
Jamie, thank you. A very important question. How do we ensure that we build manufacturing capacity that is sustainable? We've had very interesting debates around some of the values of an RNA platform. Simon has talked about VLP is an incredibly important platform. But some of the value of this kind of platform, which we now are analyzing and getting to understand better, is that there is a paradigm shift around economies of scale. We don't believe that we need 4 or 5 billion dose facilities to be built. We believe there's a different unit of economics, which means that we could build 7 or 8 smaller, bankable, sustainable facilities on the continent to produce the 1.3 or 1.4 billion doses that we may need for beyond COVID. The other way to sustain a manufacturing sector is to build an ecosystem around it, a pipeline of products that will move through to manufacturing, products which are addressing a need, a market need, or a human health need, and that has long-term sustainability. So one of the important things of the mRNA Hub is that what we're building is capacity for clinical trial manufacturing. There is no facility on the African continent that is licensed to produce clinical trial material. The facility here at the Hub is designed to do exactly that. So apart from design and development and production, we have the ability to produce clinical trial material. The ecosystem around regulatory, as you know, Africa is moving very fast to have quite a number of our regulatory authority systems reaching ML3. We have 2 at the moment, and we believe that we will have 4 or 5 in the short term. That is essential to get a sustainable manufacturing for vaccines. The other important component is clinical trials. South Africa has a fantastic clinical trial infrastructure. We know that not only for TB and HIV, but particularly also for COVID. We need to ensure that our clinical trial sites and our clinical trial capabilities on the continent is aligned with the products. PAVM has identified 22 vaccines that needs to be localized in terms of production. We need to ensure that we align the clinical trial development, the manufacturing capacity, and the market need to be able to ensure that we have sustainability.
Thank you, Petro. Maybe Simon, you want to add briefly?
Well, I mean, like I said before, like Petro said, we need to really invest in R&D. The number one thing is that there's some of the diseases that plague us are not the diseases that plague the West. So we have to have the capacity to make vaccines and then move them through the cycle, preclinical and clinical trials. And like she said, you need a facility that can make clinical trial material that you can use. And this is one of the issues and problems that we're having. So having the whole cycle, R&D, drug substance, and then finish is probably the only way that we can sustain this. So we need to increase that drug substance manufacturing capability. And as you know, almost 80% of what we have today are focusing, even the announcement that we have had recently, focus on finish operations.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't continue to focus on that. We need to think about how we can make vaccines against the disease that plague us, and then think about making the drug substance, like Petro said, and then eventually the finish. So that is the focus of what we're doing, and we saw that as a gap, and then we are coming in to see how we can close the gap.
On the question on having fit for purposes or low resource settings, I know Frederik talked about the recent call for investments for heat stabilized. But do you want to add something there, Frederik?
Sorry, just to say that I think this is where our collaboration with the World Health Organization is absolutely essential. So when we launched our first calls around Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, Lassa fever, and Nipah, WHO was very effective in establishing the TPPs, and as you say, now we're supporting this calls for finding supporting projects to really make vaccines more thermostable.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for this very insightful discussion. And we at Devex will continue to report on progress on these efforts in the African continent. So please sign up to our Global Health newsletter checkup. And here's a quick look at the highlights from the discussion.